The massive alien ship floated in the darkness of space like a sleeping giant. Its silver walls reflected the light from distant stars, making it shine like a jewel against the black background. Inside the ship, long corridors stretched in every direction, filled with strange lights and sounds that no human had ever heard before. Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison walked slowly through one of these corridors, his heavy boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. He wore his best military uniform with all his medals and ribbons placed perfectly on his chest. The uniform was dark blue with silver buttons that caught the alien lights as he moved. His face showed the tiredness that came from traveling through space for many days, but his back was straight and his eyes stayed alert. Behind Jake walked Ambassador Lisa Carter, a tall woman with gray hair pulled back in a neat style. She carried a black briefcase filled with important papers about Earth and humanity. Her face showed both excitement and worry as she prepared for the most important meeting in human history. Next to her walked 3 other people from Earth's government, all dressed in their finest clothes for this special day. The group followed a tall alien creature down the corridor. The alien was called Captain Zilmoth, and he belonged to a race known as the Zephyrians. His skin was a deep purple color, and his body was covered in what looked like natural armor. 2 small horns grew from his forehead, and his eyes glowed with a soft yellow light. He moved with the grace of a trained warrior, never making a sound despite his large size. Jake tried not to show his pain as he walked. His left leg hurt with every step, a reminder of an old injury that would never fully heal. The doctors had done their best, but some wounds leave marks that last forever. He had learned to live with the pain, to hide it from others who might see it as weakness. Today, more than ever, he needed to appear strong. The corridor ended at a large set of doors made from some kind of blue metal. Strange symbols covered the surface, glowing with their own inner light. Captain Zilmoth placed his hand on a small panel next to the doors, and they opened with a quiet hiss. Beyond the doors lay the most amazing room Jake had ever seen. The conference chamber was huge, with a ceiling so high that it disappeared into shadows above. The walls were covered with screens showing images of different planets and star systems. In the center of the room sat a large round table made from what looked like black glass. Around the table were many chairs, each one different from the others. Some were tall and thin, others were wide and low. Each chair seemed designed for a different type of alien creature. Standing around the room were dozens of Zephyrian warriors. They wore armor that looked like it was made from the same material as their natural skin, but darker and thicker. Each warrior carried weapons that Jake had never seen before. Long staffs that glowed with energy, and curved blades that seemed to cut through the air itself. The warriors stood in perfect lines, their glowing eyes watching every move the humans made. At the far end of the table stood the most impressive Zephyrian of all. Commander Vextar was taller than the others, with darker purple skin and larger horns. Scars covered his arms and face, telling stories of many battles fought and won. His armor was decorated with symbols that Jake guessed showed his rank and achievements. When he spoke, his voice was deep and powerful, filling the entire room. "Welcome, creatures of Earth," Commander Vexitar said in English that sounded strange with his alien accent. "You have traveled far to reach this place. We will speak of many things today." Ambassador Carter stepped forward and bowed her head slightly. "Thank you, Commander Vexitar. We are honored to be here and grateful for this chance to meet with your people." Jake watched the exchange carefully, noting how the Zephyrians stood and moved. Everything about them suggested a military culture based on strength and honor. The way they held themselves, the way they looked at the humans, even the way they arranged their weapons. It all spoke of a people who respected power above all else. The ambassador began to introduce each member of the human team. When she reached Jake, she said, "This is Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison. He serves as our military advisor and security chief for this mission." Commander Vextar looked at Jake with interest. His glowing eyes seemed to study every detail of the human soldier's appearance. "You are a warrior," the commander said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir," Jake replied, keeping his voice steady and respectful. "Good. Warriors understand each other, even across the stars. As the formal introductions continued, Jake felt his leg beginning to throb with pain. The long walk through the ship and the stress of the situation were making his old injury worse. He shifted his weight slightly, trying to find a position that would ease the discomfort without drawing attention to himself. Captain Zilmoth noticed the small movement. His warrior training had taught him to watch for signs of weakness or deception in others. He saw how Jake favored his right leg, how he occasionally pressed his lips together when he thought no one was looking. The human was in pain, but trying to hide it. This could be seen as either strength or foolishness, depending on one's point of view. Ambassador Carter gestured toward the table. "Shall we begin our discussions?" Commander Vextar nodded and moved to a large chair at the head of the table. The other Zephyrians took their places according to what seemed like a complex system of rank and honor. Jake noticed that each alien knew exactly where to sit without being told. The seating arrangement clearly meant something important in their culture. The humans approached the table more slowly, unsure of the proper protocol. Ambassador Carter chose a chair that faced Commander Vextar directly. The other team members took seats nearby, leaving several chairs empty around the large table. Jake stood behind the ambassador's chair, as was proper for a security officer. But as the minutes passed and his leg pain grew worse, he began to eye the empty chairs longingly. His injury made standing for long periods very difficult, and he could feel his strength starting to fade. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Jake made a decision. There were several empty chairs around the table, and no one seemed to be using them. Surely it would be acceptable for him to sit in one, especially since he was there to provide security, rather than participate in the actual negotiations. He moved slowly toward the nearest empty chair, trying to be as quiet and unobtrusive as possible. The chair looked comfortable, with a high back and soft padding. Just as he was about to sit down, a strong purple hand shot out and blocked his path. Captain Zilmoth stood directly in front of Jake, his hand extended like a barrier. The alien's glowing eyes stared into Jake's face with an expression that was hard to read. Around the room, other Zephyrian warriors turned to watch what was happening. "You may not sit there," Captain Zilmoth said in a voice that was quiet but firm. Jake stopped immediately, his hand still reaching toward the chair. He looked around the room and saw that all eyes were on him. The other humans looked worried and confused. The Zephyrians looked stern and disapproving. "I apologize," Jake said, stepping back from the chair. "I didn't realize that seat was reserved." "It is not reserved," Captain Zilmoth replied, "but you have not earned the right to sit at this table." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He felt his face grow warm with embarrassment, but he kept his expression neutral. Years of military training had taught him how to control his emotions even when facing humiliation. Ambassador Carter stood up quickly. "Captain Zilmoth, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Sergeant Morrison is an honored member of our delegation." "Honor must be proven, not claimed," Commander Vextar said from his position at the head of the table. "Your warrior may stand with the others until he shows his worth." Jake straightened his shoulders and took his position behind the ambassador's chair once again. The pain in his leg seemed to double, as if his body was responding to the stress of the situation. But he would not show weakness now, not in front of these alien warriors who already questioned his value. "Of course," Jake said simply. "I understand." But inside he wondered how he would manage to stand through what might be hours of negotiations, and what these aliens meant when they spoke of proving honor and worth. Jake Morrison stood as still as a statue behind Ambassador Carter's chair. His military training had taught him how to stand at attention for long periods, but that was before his injury. Now, every minute felt like an hour as the throbbing pain in his left leg grew stronger and stronger. The negotiations had begun in earnest. Commander Vexistar spoke in a deep voice about his people's history of conquest and their many victories in battle. He talked about planets they had taken and enemies they had defeated. Each story seemed designed to show how strong and powerful the Zephyrians were. Ambassador Carter listened carefully and then began to tell the Zephyrians about humanity's achievements. She spoke about the cities humans had built, the diseases they had cured, and the scientific discoveries they had made. She talked about how humans had learned to work together and help each other, even across great distances. Jake tried to focus on the conversation, but the pain made it difficult to concentrate. He shifted his weight from his left leg to his right leg, trying to find some relief. The movement was small, but several Zephyrian warriors noticed it. They watched him with curious eyes, trying to understand why he kept moving. Captain Zilmoth stood near the wall with the other Zephyrian officers. He found himself watching the human soldier more than listening to the negotiations. There was something strange about this human that he could not figure out. The man stood straight and proud, like a true warrior should. But there were small signs that something was wrong. The human's left hand sometimes made a small fist as if he was fighting against something inside himself. His jaw would tighten for a moment, then relax. Sometimes he would take a deep breath and let it out slowly, the way someone might do when trying to control pain or anger. In Zephyrian culture, warriors proved their strength through combat. They fought great battles and defeated powerful enemies. The stories of their victories were told for generations, and their scars were worn with pride. But this human had done none of these things, at least not that Captain Zilmoth could see. So why did he stand there with such dignity? Why did he refuse to show weakness, even when it was clear he was suffering? It made no sense to the alien warrior. An hour passed, then 2 hours. The pain in Jake's leg had spread up to his hip and down to his ankle. Each time he tried to shift positions, the movement seemed to make things worse. Sweat began to form on his forehead despite the cool temperature in the room. The negotiations were not going well. The Zephyrians wanted to know what humans could offer them in terms of military strength. They talked about their need for allies who could fight beside them in battle. Commander Vextar asked direct questions about human weapons and battle tactics. Ambassador Carter tried to explain that humans preferred peaceful solutions to problems. She talked about diplomacy and trade, about sharing knowledge and resources. But the Zephyrians seemed unimpressed by these ideas. They wanted to know about human warriors and their victories in combat. "Your people must have great battles to speak of," Commander Vextar said, leaning forward in his chair. "What enemies have you defeated? What worlds have you conquered?" "We prefer to avoid war when possible," Ambassador Carter replied carefully. "Humans believe that the greatest victory is preventing a battle from happening at all." Several Zephyrian officers made sounds that might have been laughter or disgust. It was hard to tell the difference. They clearly did not understand how anyone could consider avoiding battle to be a victory. Jake wanted to speak up, to defend his people and explain what human courage really meant. But his position as security officer meant he should stay quiet, unless asked to speak. And right now, all his energy was focused on simply remaining upright. Captain Zilmoth noticed that the human soldier's face had grown pale. Tiny drops of sweat were now visible on his forehead and upper lip. The man was clearly in distress, but he continued to stand at attention as if nothing was wrong. This behavior puzzled the Zephyrian captain even more. In his culture, if a warrior was injured or sick, he would either ask for help or prove his strength by overcoming the challenge in some dramatic way. But this human was doing neither. He was simply enduring, quietly and without complaint. During a brief break in the negotiations, Ambassador Carter turned to Jake with a concerned expression. She had noticed his pale color and the way he occasionally closed his eyes for just a moment longer than normal. "Sergeant Morrison," she said quietly, "perhaps you should step outside and get some fresh air." Jake shook his head slightly. "I'm fine, ma'am, just doing my job." "You don't look fine, you look like you're in pain." "I can handle it, ma'am. I won't give them any reason to think humans are weak." Ambassador Carter wanted to argue, but she understood Jake's point. The Zephyrians were clearly judging humanity based on strength and military power. If their security officer showed weakness now, it might hurt the negotiations. "At least sit down somewhere," she whispered. "There are chairs along the wall." "No, ma'am. I'll stand where I'm supposed to stand." Captain Zilmoth had been watching this quiet conversation with great interest. He could not hear the words, but he could see the concern on the female human's face and the stubborn determination on the soldier's face. The man was refusing help, even from his own people. This was becoming very interesting indeed. When the negotiations resumed, Commander Vexistar began asking more specific questions about human military capabilities. He wanted to know how many soldiers Earth could provide for joint operations. He asked about human weapons and spacecraft, about battle strategies and warrior training. The questions made Ambassador Carter uncomfortable. Earth's military was strong, but it was designed mainly for defense and peacekeeping. Humans had not spent centuries conquering other worlds like the Zephyrians had. She tried to explain this difference, but the aliens seemed to see it as evidence of weakness rather than wisdom. Jake listened to the conversation with growing frustration. He knew that human soldiers were among the bravest and most dedicated in the galaxy. He had served with men and women who would give their lives without hesitation to protect others. But how could he explain that to aliens who only understood strength in terms of conquest and domination? The pain in his leg was becoming unbearable. Each minute felt like a test of endurance that he was slowly failing. His vision began to blur, slightly at the edges, and he had to concentrate hard to keep his balance. Several of the younger Zephyrian warriors began to whisper among themselves. They pointed at Jake and made comments in their own language. Captain Zilmoth could hear some of what they were saying. "Look at the human warrior," one of them said. "He shakes like a leaf in the wind." "Perhaps their species is naturally weak," another replied. "He cannot even stand properly." "Why does he not sit down if he is tired?" asked a third. "Is he too proud or too stupid?" Captain Zilmoth found himself growing annoyed with his fellow warriors. They were judging the human without understanding what they were seeing. Yes, the man was clearly suffering, but he was also clearly choosing to suffer rather than show weakness or ask for help. In Zephyrian culture, this might be seen as foolish pride, but Captain Zilmoth was beginning to suspect there was more to it than that. There was something about this human's quiet strength that reminded him of the greatest warriors he had known, not the ones who won through superior firepower or numbers, but the ones who won through sheer determination and refusal to give up. 3 hours into the negotiations, Jake's condition had worsened significantly. His left leg felt like it was on fire, and the pain had spread throughout his entire body. He could feel his strength leaving him, but he refused to move from his position. Ambassador Carter noticed that Jake was swaying slightly on his feet. She made another attempt to convince him to take a break. "Sergeant, I'm ordering you to step outside and rest," she said firmly. "With respect, ma'am, I can't do that. Not while we're in a room full of alien warriors who already think humans are weak. Your health is more important than their opinion." "No, ma'am, not today. Today I represent every human soldier who ever served. I won't let them down." The quiet conversation did not go unnoticed by the Zephyrians. Commander Vextar paused in his speaking and looked directly at Jake. "Human soldier," the commander said, "you seem to be having difficulty standing. Perhaps you are not as strong as your people claim." Jake met the alien's glowing eyes without flinching. "I'm exactly where I need to be, sir." "Even though you are clearly in pain?" "Pain is temporary, sir. Duty is permanent." The answer surprised Commander Vextar. He had expected the human to deny his pain or make excuses. Instead, the man had admitted his suffering while refusing to let it affect his performance. This was behavior worthy of a true warrior. Captain Zilmoth stepped forward slightly. He was beginning to understand that there was much more to this human soldier than met the eye. The man was not weak. He was incredibly strong. But his strength was of a type that the Zephyrians had never encountered before. As the 4th hour of negotiations began, Jake Morrison continued to stand at his post, his quiet dignity and determination slowly earning the respect of warriors who were only beginning to understand what human courage really meant. 4.5 hours had passed since the negotiations began. Jake Morrison felt like his body was betraying him with each passing minute. The pain in his left leg had become a constant fire that spread through his hip and back. His hands trembled slightly, and he had to work harder and harder to keep his breathing steady and quiet. The discussion between the humans and Zephyrians had grown more tense as time went on. Commander Vextar seemed frustrated that the humans could not provide the kind of military alliance he wanted. Ambassador Carter was doing her best to explain human values, but the gap between the two cultures seemed too wide to bridge. Your people speak of peace and cooperation, Commander Vextar said, his voice showing his disappointment. But the galaxy is not a peaceful place. It is full of dangers that can only be faced with strength and weapons. We understand that, Commander, Ambassador Carter replied. But we believe that strength comes in many forms. Sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when not to fight. Several Zephyrian warriors made sounds of disagreement. They clearly thought the humans were making excuses for being weak. Captain Zilmoth watched Jake Morrison carefully, noting how the human soldier's jaw tightened every time his people were called weak. Commander Vextar stood up from his chair. I think we need a break from these talks. We will resume in 1 hour. He gestured to his warriors, and they began to file out of the room. You humans may use this time to think about what you can truly offer us. As the Zephyrians left, Jake finally allowed himself to show his exhaustion. His shoulders sagged slightly, and he closed his eyes for a moment. The room was spinning a little, and he could feel sweat running down his back. Ambassador Carter immediately turned to him with concern. Jake, sit down right now, that's an order. Jake looked around the room. Most of the Zephyrians had left, but a few guards remained near the doors. He did not want to appear weak in front of them, but he also knew he could not stand much longer, without falling down. Just for a few minutes, he said quietly, moving toward a simple chair that sat against the wall, far from the main negotiation table. As Jake lowered himself into the chair, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. The pressure on his injured leg decreased immediately, and he could finally relax the muscles that had been fighting to keep him upright. He closed his eyes and took several deep breaths. In his relief, Jake did not notice that a piece of paper had fallen from his uniform pocket. The paper fluttered to the floor beside his chair, landing face down on the alien metal surface. Captain Zilmoth had stayed behind when the other warriors left. He had been watching the human soldier with growing curiosity for hours, and he wanted to understand what drove the strange man to endure such obvious suffering without complaint. The captain saw the paper fall and walked over to where Jake sat. Human soldier, he said, pointing at the floor. You have dropped something. Jake opened his eyes and looked down. When he saw the folded piece of paper on the floor, his face immediately changed. The color drained from his cheeks, and he quickly leaned forward to reach for it. Oh no, Jake said, his voice full of worry. I didn't realize. But Captain Zilmoth was faster. His long purple arm reached down and picked up the paper before Jake could grab it. The alien held it carefully in his large hands, noting how worn and soft it felt, as if it had been folded and unfolded many times. Please, Jake said, reaching out his hand. That's personal. It's not important to anyone else. Captain. Zilmoth looked at the paper, then at Jake's face. The human soldier looked more worried about this small piece of paper than he had about standing in pain for hours. This made the alien even more curious. If it is not important, Captain Zilmoth said slowly, then why do you carry it everywhere? Why does it look like you read it often? Jake's face grew red with embarrassment. He tried to think of what to say, but his mind was clouded with exhaustion and pain. It's from my family. It's nothing that would matter to your people. Your family? Captain Zilmoth's glowing eyes grew brighter with interest. You have a family back on your world? Yes, sir. A daughter. Jake's voice became softer when he mentioned her. Her name is Emma. She's 7 years old. The alien captain looked at the folded paper again. In Zephyrian culture, warriors rarely spoke of their families. They lived for battle and honor, not for domestic life. But this human soldier carried something from his family with him, on a dangerous mission across the stars. What does the paper say? Captain Zilmoth asked. Jake hesitated. He did not want to share something so personal with an alien who might not understand. But he was too tired to think of a good excuse, and something in the captain's voice sounded genuinely curious rather than mocking. It's just a note she wrote before I left. On this mission, Jake said quietly. She wanted me to have something to remember her by. Captain Zilmoth held the paper carefully, as if it were made of something precious. May I read it? I want to understand your human customs better. Jake wanted to say no. The note was private, meant only for him, but he could see that the alien was truly interested in learning about humans, not just making fun of them. Maybe this could help bridge the gap between their two peoples. I guess that would be okay, Jake said reluctantly. Captain Zilmoth unfolded the paper with great care. The writing was clearly done by a child. The letters were large and uneven, some of them backward or upside down. But the message was clear enough for the alien to read. Dear Daddy, the note began, I hope you can sit down and rest on your mission. The doctor said your leg hurts because you saved those people. I drew you a picture of us when you come home. Love, Emma. P.S. Mommy says you're the bravest person in the whole world. Captain Zilmoth read the note twice, then looked at the drawing that was attached to it. The picture showed a man in a blue uniform holding hands with a small girl. Both figures were smiling, and there was a bright yellow sun in the sky above them. The drawing was simple, but it showed love and happiness in every crayon line. The alien captain stared at the paper for a long time without speaking. Jake watched his face carefully, trying to understand what the Zephyrian was thinking. Your leg hurts because you saved people? Captain Zilmoth finally asked. Jake nodded, his face showing embarrassment again. It was my job. There was a building that was going to collapse. People were trapped inside. I got them out, but a piece of metal fell on my leg. The doctors did what they could, but you were injured saving others? The captain's voice sounded different now, more serious and respectful. It's what soldiers do, sir. We protect people who can't protect themselves. Captain Zilmoth looked at the drawing again. In the picture, the little girl looked happy and safe, holding her father's hand. The alien began to understand something that had confused him for hours. This is why you stood in pain all day, the captain said. It was not a question. Jake looked confused. Sir, you did not want us to think your people were weak. You stood in pain to show strength for your daughter and your world. Yes, sir, I suppose that's right. Captain Zilmoth folded the paper carefully and handed it back to Jake. In my culture, we fight for honor and conquest. We defeat enemies and take their worlds. But you fight for something different. Yes, sir. We fight to protect the people we love. The alien captain was quiet for several minutes, thinking about what he had learned. Jake sat in his chair, grateful for the rest but worried about what would happen when the negotiations resumed. Human soldier, Captain Zilmoth said finally, I must ask you something. The injury to your leg, it ended your career as a fighting warrior? Jake nodded. I can't serve in combat anymore, but I can still help in other ways. And yet you came. On this dangerous mission, far from your world and your daughter, someone had to keep the diplomats safe. And I believe this mission is important for all of humanity, including Emma. Captain Zilmoth looked at Jake with new eyes. Here was a warrior who had sacrificed his body to save others, then sacrificed his time with his beloved daughter to serve his people once again. This was not the behavior of a weak person. This was the behavior of someone whose strength came from love rather than hate. Your daughter, the captain said. She is proud of her father? Jake smiled for the first time all day. She tells everyone at school that her daddy is a hero. I don't think I'm a hero, but if she thinks so, that's all that matters to me. Captain, Zilmoth stood up and walked to the large windows that showed the stars outside. He thought about his own life, about the battles he had fought and the enemies he had defeated. He had earned respect and honor, but he had never earned the kind of love that shone from that child's drawing. Human soldier, he said, turning back. To Jake, I think it is time for me to speak with Commander Vextar. There are things about your people that we have not understood. Jake looked worried. Sir, I hope I haven't caused problems for the negotiations. No, Captain Zilmoth said, his voice firm and certain. I think you may have saved them. As the alien captain left the room, Jake sat alone with his daughter's note, wondering what would happen next and hoping that somehow His love for Emma might help bring peace between the stars. Captain Zilmoth walked quickly through the corridors of the ship, his mind racing with new thoughts. The note from the human soldier's daughter had changed everything he thought he knew about these strange creatures from Earth. He had to find Commander Vextar immediately. The captain found his commander in the war room, studying star charts with several other high-ranking officers. The room was filled with displays showing military positions and battle plans. Weapons hung on the walls like decorations, each one representing a victory from the Zephyrian past. "Commander," Captain Zilmoth said, approaching the large table, where Vexitar stood. "I need to speak with you about the human soldier." Commander Vexitar looked up from his charts with an annoyed expression. "The weak one who could not even stand properly, what about him?" "Sir, I believe we have made a serious mistake about these humans. With your permission, I would like to show you something." The other officers in the room turned to listen. Captain Zilmoth was known for his wisdom and careful judgment. If he thought something was important, it usually was. Commander Vextar gestured for him to continue. "Speak freely, Captain." Zilmoth pulled out a small device that could project images in the air. He had taken a picture of the child's note and drawing before returning it to Jake. The words and simple artwork appeared above the table, where all the officers could see them. "This fell from the human soldier's pocket," Captain Zilmoth explained. "It is from his 7-year-old daughter." The Zephyrian officers leaned forward to read the note. Several of them made sounds of confusion as they tried to understand what they were seeing. "A child's drawing?" one officer asked. "Why would a warrior carry such a thing into battle?" "Read the words carefully," Captain Zilmoth said, "especially the part about his leg injury." Commander Vextar read aloud. "The doctor said your leg hurts because you saved those people." He paused and looked at his captain. "Saved what people?" "I asked him about it, sir. The human soldier was injured when he rescued civilians from a collapsing building. His leg was crushed by falling metal while he was carrying people to safety." The room fell silent. The Zephyrian officers looked at each other with expressions of surprise and confusion. In their culture, warriors were injured fighting enemies, not saving helpless people. "He was injured saving non-combatants?" Commander Vextar asked slowly. "Yes, sir. And according to his daughter's note, this injury ended his combat career. But he continues to serve his people in other ways." Another officer stepped forward. "Captain, are you saying this human warrior sacrificed his fighting ability to save civilians?" "That is exactly what I am saying, sir. And there is more." Captain Zilmoth touched his device again, and the image changed to show just the child's drawing. "Look at this picture his daughter made. See how happy she is, how safe she feels with her father." The officers studied the simple crayon drawing. The little girl in the picture was smiling, holding her father's hand without any fear. The sun shone brightly above them, and everything in the drawing showed peace and love. "I do not understand," one officer said. "Why would a warrior's child feel safe? Should she not be proud of his battles and conquests?" "Because human warriors do not fight for conquest," Captain Zilmoth explained. "They fight to protect. This man's daughter feels safe because she knows her father will always try to keep her and others from harm." Commander Vextar stared at the image for a long time. "Captain, are you telling me that this human stood in pain for hours, refusing to sit down, all to show strength for his people?" "Yes, sir. But not strength as we understand it. He wanted to show that humans do not give up, even when they are suffering. He was thinking of his daughter and all the other humans who are counting on these negotiations to succeed." The room was completely quiet now. Every officer was thinking about what they had learned. This changed everything they thought they knew about human warriors. "Tell me more about this human's injury," Commander Vextar ordered. Captain Zilmoth had spoken with Jake for a few more minutes after reading the note. The building was an apartment complex where families lived. When it started to collapse, most people ran away to safety. But the human soldiers ran toward the danger. They went inside to find anyone who might be trapped. "How many people did he save?" 12 civilians, sir, including 3 children. He made multiple trips into the building, carrying people out one by one. On his last trip, part of the structure fell on him. An older officer with many scars on his face stepped forward. Captain, in our culture, a warrior who could no longer fight would retire or take a position far from battle. But this human came on a dangerous mission across the stars. Why? Because he believes this mission is important for all humans, including his daughter. He may not be able to fight anymore, but he can still serve and protect in other ways. Commander Vexitar walked around the table, his heavy footsteps echoing in the quiet room. So this human warrior sacrificed his body to save strangers. Then he sacrificed time with his beloved child to serve his people on a mission that might help secure their future. That is correct, sir. And he stood in pain for hours because he did not want us to think his people were weak. Yes, sir. The commander stopped walking and looked directly at Captain Zilmoth. What do you think this means for our negotiations? Sir, I think we have been asking the wrong questions. We have been trying to judge human strength by our own standards. We wanted to know about their conquests and their victories in battle. But human strength is something completely different. Explain. Captain Zilmoth gestured to the image still, floating above the table. Look at this child's face, sir. She is not afraid of the galaxy or its dangers because she knows her father will protect her. Now imagine an entire species that feels this way. Imagine billions of humans who know that their warriors fight not for glory or conquest, but to keep them safe. The officers began to murmur among themselves as they understood what the captain was saying. You are suggesting, Commander Vexitar said slowly, that humans would make good allies not because they are fierce conquerors, but because they are dependable protectors. Exactly, sir. Think about it. If we were in danger, which type of ally would we want? Warriors who fight for their own glory or warriors who fight because they love the people they are protecting? An older officer spoke up. Captain, warriors who fight for love will never give up. They will fight to the last breath because surrender means their families will be harmed. And warriors who fight for conquest, another officer added, might decide that retreat or surrender is acceptable if the price becomes too high. Commander Vexitar nodded slowly. You are both correct. A warrior fighting for glory might stop when the glory is no longer worth the cost. But a warrior fighting for his child will never stop. Captain Zilmoth touched his device again, and the image changed back to show the complete note. Sir, there is something else. The child wrote that her mother says her father is the bravest person in the whole world. But when I spoke with the human soldier, he said he does not think of himself as a hero. What did he say exactly? He said that saving people was just his job, what soldiers are supposed to do. He seemed surprised that anyone would think it was special. The room fell silent again as the officers considered this. A warrior who performed heroic acts but did not consider himself a hero was something they had never encountered before. Commander, the scarred officer said, if this is truly how all human warriors think, then their entire military is made up of people who will sacrifice themselves without hesitation to protect others. And they do this not for honor or reward, another officer added, but because they believe it is simply the right thing to do. Commander Vexitar looked around the room at his officers. Gentlemen, I think we need to completely change our approach to these negotiations. We have been trying to determine if humans are strong enough to be our allies, but the real question is whether we are worthy enough to be their allies. Captain Zilmoth smiled, a rare expression on his Zephyrian face. Sir, I believe that human soldier has been showing us exactly that kind of worthiness all day. He stood in pain for hours not to prove his own strength but to show respect for us and our customs, even though we showed him no respect in return, the commander said quietly. Yes, sir. He treated us with honor even when we treated him poorly. Commander Vexitar made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Captain, go. Back to the conference room. Tell the humans that we will resume negotiations in 30 minutes, and Captain? Yes, sir? Bring me my finest ceremonial chair, the one reserved for the most honored warriors. Sir, I have a human soldier to properly welcome to our table. As Captain Zilmoth hurried away to prepare for what would be a very different kind of negotiation, Commander Vexitar looked once more at the image of a little girl's drawing. In those simple crayon lines, he saw the future of an alliance built, not on conquest and domination, but on love and protection. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Vexitar began to understand what true strength really meant. Jake Morrison sat alone in the conference room, still resting in the simple chair against the wall. His leg felt much better after sitting for 30 minutes, but he knew the relief would not last long once he had to stand again. He held his daughter's note carefully in his hands, reading it one more time before putting it back in his pocket. The doors to the room opened, and Captain Zilmoth entered, followed by several other Zephyrian warriors. But something was different this time. Instead of their usual stern expressions, the aliens looked almost respectful. Behind them came 4 warriors carrying something that made Jake's eyes widen in surprise. They were carrying the most beautiful chair Jake had ever seen. It was made from what looked like silver metal, but it shone with colors that changed as the light hit it from different angles. Strange symbols were carved into the arms and back, and soft cushions covered in rich purple fabric made it look incredibly comfortable. "Sergeant Morrison," Captain Zilmoth said formally, "please remain seated. Commander Vexitar wishes to speak with you." Jake started to stand up out of respect, but the captain held up his hand. "Please stay where you are for now, Commander." Vexitar entered the room with slow, ceremonial steps. His expression was completely different from earlier. Instead of the cold, judging look he had worn before, his face showed something that looked almost like admiration. Ambassador Carter and the other human diplomats followed the Zephyrians into the room. They looked confused and worried about what was happening. The ambassador caught Jake's eye and gave him a questioning look, but he could only shrug in response. Commander Vexitar approached Jake's chair and stopped a few feet away. Then, to everyone's amazement, the powerful alien warrior bowed his head in a gesture of respect. "Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison of Earth," the commander said in his deep voice, "I owe you and your people an apology." Jake blinked in surprise. "Sir, I don't understand. We have spent this day judging your people by our own standards. We looked for strength in conquest and victory in battle, but we failed to see the true strength that was standing right in front of us." The commander gestured to the ornate chair that his warriors had brought. "This chair has been in my family for 300 years. It is reserved for warriors who have shown the highest form of courage and honor. Today, I offer it to you." Jake stared at the magnificent chair, then looked back at the commander. "Sir, I appreciate the gesture, but I haven't done anything to earn such an honor." "You have done something that no Zephyrian warrior has ever done," Commander Vexitar replied. "You stood in pain for 5 hours not to prove your strength to enemies, but to show respect to strangers who had treated you poorly." Captain Zilmoth stepped forward. "Sergeant Morrison, I have told my commander about your daughter's note. We understand now why you endured such suffering without complaint." Jake felt his face grow warm with embarrassment. "Sir, that was just a personal letter. It wasn't meant for anyone else to see. But it showed us something very important." "Commander," Vexitar said, "it showed us that human warriors fight not for glory or conquest, but for love. You carry your daughter's words with you because they remind you why your service matters." The commander walked closer to Jake. "Tell me about the day you were injured." Jake looked around the room at all the faces watching him. He had never liked talking about that day, but something in the commander's voice made him feel like it was important to answer. "It was just a normal day," Jake began quietly. "I was stationed in the city when we got a call about a building collapse. An old apartment complex was falling down and people were trapped inside. What did you do?" "What any soldier would do, sir. We went in to get them out." Jake's voice became stronger as he continued. "There were families in there, mothers, fathers, children. They were scared and hurt, and they needed help." "How many people did you save?" 12, sir, but it wasn't just me. My whole unit was there. We all worked together." Commander Vexitar nodded. "And on your last trip into the building?" Jake was quiet for a moment, remembering that terrible day. "There was a little boy, maybe 5 years old. He was trapped under some furniture in an apartment on the 2nd floor. His mother was screaming for him outside. I couldn't leave him there. So you went back in even though the building was collapsing?" "Yes, sir." I got the boy out, but a beam fell on my leg as we were leaving. I made sure he was safe first, then my unit got me to the hospital. The room was completely silent as everyone listened to Jake's simple account of his heroism. Ambassador Carter had tears in her eyes, though she had heard the story before. "And this injury ended your combat career," Commander Vextar said. "Yes, sir. But I can still serve in other ways. That's why I'm here." Commander Vextar turned to address the entire room. "Do you all understand what this means? This human warrior sacrificed his body to save a child he had never met. He gave up his career as a soldier to protect an innocent life." The Zephyrian officers nodded solemnly. Captain Zilmoth spoke up. "In our culture, we have stories of great warriors who died in battle. But we have no stories of warriors who sacrificed their futures to save strangers. That is because," Commander Vextar said, "we have never truly understood what courage means. We thought it meant defeating enemies and conquering worlds. But real courage means protecting those who cannot protect themselves." The commander gestured to his warriors, and they carefully moved the ceremonial chair to a position of honor at the negotiation table. Then Vextar turned back to Jake. "Staff Sergeant Morrison, would you do me the honor of taking your proper place at this table?" Jake looked at the beautiful chair, then at all the faces watching him. "Sir, I'm not sure I understand what's happening." "You are being honored as the warrior you truly are," Commander Vextar explained. "Not because you have conquered enemies, but because you have saved lives. Not because you have brought pain to others, but because you have taken pain upon yourself to protect the innocent." Jake slowly stood up from his simple chair, his legs still aching but his heart full of emotions he could not name. He walked carefully to the ceremonial chair and sat down with great care. The moment he was seated, every Zephyrian warrior in the room raised their right hand to their chest in a formal salute. Commander Vextar spoke in a voice that carried throughout the room. "Let it be known that on this day we have learned the true meaning of strength from our human friends. Let it be recorded that Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison of Earth has shown us that the greatest warriors are those who fight not for themselves, but for love." Ambassador Carter wiped tears from her eyes and stepped forward. "Commander Vextar, on behalf of humanity, I thank you for this honor. But I hope you understand that Jake represents millions of people like him. Human soldiers, police officers, firefighters, doctors, all of them serve because they want to protect and help others." "We are beginning to understand this," the commander replied. "And it changes everything about how we see your people as potential allies." Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Commander, would it be okay if I showed you something else? It's another picture of my daughter." "Of course." Jake touched his phone screen a few times, then held it up so everyone could see. The picture showed Emma at her school, wearing a bright yellow dress and holding a certificate. "She won an award last month for helping other kids who were being bullied," Jake explained. "The teacher said Emma always stands up for children who are smaller or scared." Commander Vextar looked at the picture with wonder. "Even your children understand about protecting others, yes, sir. We try to teach them that being strong means using your strength to help people, not to hurt them." Captain Zilmoth stepped forward. "Sergeant Morrison, would your daughter like to know that her father has made friends among the stars?" Jake smiled, the first real smile he had shown all day. "She would love that, sir. She's always been interested in space and other worlds." "Then perhaps," Commander Vextar said, "we should arrange a communication so she can meet some of her father's new friends." The negotiations that followed were completely different from the morning session. Instead of talking about military conquest and battle strategies, the two sides discussed how they could work together to protect innocent people throughout the galaxy. They talked about sharing technology to help colonies that were struggling, about joint missions to rescue people in danger, and about building a future where children of all species could grow up safe and happy. Jake participated in the discussions, offering insights about human peacekeeping methods and defensive strategies. His input was valued and respected by everyone in the room. As the day ended, a historic alliance was signed between Earth and the Zephyrian worlds. The treaty included provisions for mutual protection, humanitarian missions, and the sharing of knowledge that could help save lives. That evening, Jake sat in his quarters aboard the alien ship, video calling his daughter on Earth. Emma's excited face filled the screen as he told her about his day. "Daddy, did you really sit in a special chair with the aliens?" she asked. "I did, sweetheart, and they want to meet you." Emma clapped her hands with joy. "Can I show them my drawing?" "I already did. They thought it was beautiful." Emma was quiet for a moment, then said, "Daddy, are the aliens nice?"